Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call the Coronavirus Ad Hoc Committee for December the 17th, 2024 to order. Ms. Carrillo, if you will, please call the roll.
Branham,
Here.
Barron,
Here.
Newton. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And for the record, Ms. Newton did notify me that she would not be in attendance as she is traveling for work. Our next order of business is the approval of minutes from July the 2nd, 2024. You can find those on pages 5 through 8. I'll entertain a motion if there are no revisions.
Move to approve.
Second, Ms. Carrillo?
Branham,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Next order of business is adoption of the agenda. I was really about to call you somebody that you're not. Mr. Brown, do you have any revisions to our agenda?
No requested changes.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Second, Ms. Carrillo?
Branham,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
Motion approved.
I also like to take the opportunity to welcome our chair, Ms. Mackey, to our meeting today. Next order of business is items for discussion/action. We'll hear a grants update from administration. Mr. Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you. Since these committee has taken action on a number of items, now we're coming back providing an update. I know the committee asked for an update. In your packet, there is some documentation, but we do have ACA Thomas, if you will recognize her and her team, to provide a general update and take any questions that you all may have.
Recognize.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, other members, for being here this afternoon. We're pleased to say that we are now winding down our ARPA grant allocation process, and we feel like it's been very successful. If you look on your in your packet on page 9, it gives you a general overview of the process, just as a reminder for council as to what this process was. There was one clerical error that was made on about 15 contracts that indicated a December 31st date. However, we were able to contact all applicants and update them on that information to ensure that they were able to have time to comply with the October 31st date to end their funding period. Additionally, as council did ask, we provided notices to our grantees, one at the end of June, issued the 1st of August, the 5th of August, one at the end of August issued on the 8th of September, and one on the 5th of October for the end of September, updating our grantees as to what balance they still had to expend and by what period. I've also provided to each of you notices, copies of those notices, so you have an idea of what was actually sent to each of the grantees. At the end of November, we've just completed the reimbursement process. We have of the $6.3 million that was allocated in grants to groups, we have reimbursed just over $5.4 million, which equates to about 85% of what was allocated. If you will go to page 10 of your packet, this gives you a breakdown by category as to the amount that was allocated, and the amount that was expended by each category and the balance remaining. This is strictly by the category of allocation that council did provide. Reminding you also that the affordable housing, $4 million, will be used for affordable housing. It was just moved from these funds to be allocated in a different manner, and their youth and recreation services was not allocated and will be moved to the Family Services Center based upon council's previous actions. If you will go to page 14, there is an actual grant award detail. This is broken out by grantee, the awarded amount, the amount expended, the reimbursed amount, and any remaining balance that there was for each of these groups. We had approximately 30 grantees, and we're happy to say that for the most part, We had a very successful process with them. I'll remind you that each of these groups had to go through desk review before reimbursements began to ensure that they were federally compliant, since these are federal funds. And I'm happy to take any questions that anyone might have as to specifics.
You recognize Mr. Branham.
Thank you. So, Ms. Thomas, thank you for the information. It's very, very helpful. Do you happen to have the total for the reobligated from grants to Family Services Center?
At present, it's $881,098.35.
Okay, I see that here. All right, thanks. I was looking at that wrong.
So, ACA Thomas, you mentioned that we had a pretty successful round. What could you go into some brief details as far as some of the challenges that we experienced?
Some of the challenges that we experienced was with the desk review process and getting information from the grantees. Again, some of these grantees were not accustomed to federal awards and didn't understand the complexities of receiving federal awards. So just getting them to respond in a timely manner was a brief challenge, and then getting them to get the information to our subcontractor who was performing this process for us, and getting all of the expenditures qualified, because again, not all expenditures that were budgeted, keep in mind that all of the budgeted amounts were up to the awarded amount, not a guarantee of the awarded amount. So there might have been some expenditures that they were proposing that might not have been qualified.
And then, did we run into any challenges? I know this was one thing that we kind of talked around and around about when we were going through the initial process. Any challenges with any of our grantees that had spent money, and then when it came time for reimbursement, it was like, no, this is not an allowable cost?
We did have a couple of those, and we tried to explain that process and to walk them through so that no further expenditures would be made that might not qualify. And as well, we did use our contractor to help them to look at other things that they could consider that might be allowable that they had not proposed that would be able to be expended in the interim or in replace of.
And one last thing, I'll just say, and you can provide this at a later date, but I do think that it's helpful. This was definitely a non-traditional process for us as far as giving out funds, and then even where the funds came from, honestly. So with that, it would be helpful, I think, that if we could just hear back from administration, things that really work well, and things that perhaps that we could do differently. Should there be a next time? I know many people are shaking their heads, including you, like, well, let's don't ever do this again. But I ask this question not necessarily for this committee, but I do think it's a takeaway that perhaps that can spill over to other committees like our community impact and even our grants office for that matter.
Madam Chair, one thing I will say is I will never say never. So I'm happy to do anything that council deems appropriate, as long as it's legal and ethical, which you all would only do. But I will be happy to provide you some of that information. I'd also point out that the pages following the ones that I just referenced are summaries of some of the projects and the impacts that were made in these areas. Keeping in mind that there's only about 8 that are outstanding that don't have a report, but their final reports are not due until January the 15th for our January 31st deadline to report to federal government.
Thank you, and I just, want to say publicly, this was a big task, but I think that, I hope that the services that we were able to put forth through the organizations to go back into the community was extremely helpful and needed. And to that point, it may be maybe that at some point we could look at highlighting a couple of these through our communications team to show the good work that these funds did within Richland County. Ms. Mackey, did you have something?
Oh, yes, ma'am, thank you. No, I just, really kind of adding on to the conversation as a whole. I mean, you're right, this has really been a completely new process simply because of the funds that came down from the federal government, from President Biden with the American Rescue Plan dollars. And so it is one of those things that, hadn't happened before and might not happen again just because the nature of where we were with COVID and really helping to get so many businesses and organizations and just everyday people back on track. And I think without the American Rescue Plan dollars, here in the county level and at the state level, we probably would not have seen such a fast recovery coming out of COVID. And so I'm thankful that organizations, even though the process was different and maybe strenuous for many, there are still organizations on this list that delivered in a great way with the money they received and followed through on what they said they were going to do. And so I'm thankful for them for working with us and being able to, really get that money out in the community. And I also agree with Ms. Barron's comments about being able to highlight those organizations and the programs that they were provided in the community, because without American Rescue Plan dollars, that would not have been able to happen. And that's it. We don't have any more American Rescue Plan dollars. So I think there is no other round coming to give. And so I think it was a strenuous process, but the federal government requires that. And so I want to make sure we highlight and thank them for their work.
Recognize Mr. Brenham.
Thank you. Just again for clarification, so the Youth and Recreation Services million is going to the Family Services Center, right?
It has already been transferred, yes, sir.
Already transferred, okay. So it's that million plus the current number of the 881.
Correct.
098. Okay,
Yes,
that
sir.
might ultimately go over there.
Yes, sir.
And then maybe just a question for the chair, but what's the path forward look like as far as, does this committee need to meet again?
Well, I think that once we get the final report from all of the applicants, perhaps one additional meeting, just to hear if there are anything that we need to note. But then there again, it may be something that can just be packaged in a report sent out to full council. I'll be glad to work with the administration to see what's the best way to communicate, but I don't anticipate us needing to have more than one additional meeting, if that.
Thank you.
Anything further? If not, next item on our agenda.
Move to adjourn.
Second, Ms. Carrillo?
Brenham,
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.